Good afternoon. You're listening to Gambling with an Edge. Now here are your hosts, Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Our guest today is a return visit by a man who goes by the name of Fats, and he's arguably one of the top sports bettor of all time. Fats, welcome back to Gambling with an Edge.
Pleasure to be back, Bob and Richard.
And Fats has a Twitter handle, and you made a prediction almost a year ago on Twitter. So tell us about both of those.
Well, my Twitter handle is @real, REAL _FATS. And last August 31st, the William Hill Sportsbook fired Nick Bogdanovich, who was the sportsbook director at William Hill. And Nick had been a bookmaker for years back in the day. He used to run Binion's back in my heyday. And I mean, if somebody had asked me, and I forget when, if I would rank like the top bookmakers I've ever come across, and he was in my top 5 for sure. So anyway, when he was fired last August 31st, I sent out the following tweet. Nick was a true bookmaker. I knew him well as he ran Binion Sportsbook for many years. He knows how it is supposed to be done. I'm amazed he was able to last as long as he did, working for the moronic William Hill brass. He'd be a great addition to the team at Circa Sports and a great asset. And this week on June 1st, I sent out the following tweet because they hired Nick and on June 1st. And for the record, at the end of last August, I suggested at Circa Sports scoop Nick up. I'm glad they finally did, and now Nick can go back to being the true bookmaker that he is without corporate bean counters telling him what he has to do. And that is a huge, huge pickup and asset for Circa Sports. And I wish Nick all the best, as he's not only is he a class act and a real nice guy, but he's a great bookmaker. And Bobby's got something in common with you.
Oh, yeah?
You two would bond really well. He's not a fan of social media. He does not have a Twitter account, as far as I know.
Uh-huh. Well, he knows the way. From Binion's to Circa is about as close as you can get. All right. So let's go back. And you knew somebody named Spiro, and you took a lot of delight in messing with him. So tell us about that.
Okay. Spiro was, he used to run, he used to be called Spiro the Greek, and his sports book was Olympic Sports. It was located down in, I think it was in Jamaica. And I bet with him on and off for years. But Spiro would get cranky when he lost, so a lot of times he would throw me out if you got to an injury or something or whatever it was. And from time to time you beat him pretty good, he'd throw you out. And then when he would throw me out, I would torture him until he got me back in.
Torture him how?
Well, like for example, what I would used to do was I used to have I had 8 phones in my office, 8 phone lines. And what I used to do was the way it worked when you would call up to make a bet, you would call and you would give the clerk a bet, and then the clerk would shout it out to Spiro at the front desk. So as soon as he would shut my account off, I would call up to make a bet, and the clerk would say, "Oh, your account's is closed or something. I can't do anything." And I said, "Oh, really? Can you find out why?" And then the clerk would call out to the front and get Spiro and stop him from whatever he's doing to try and get me an explanation. And then when he finally figures out that it's me, he'd say, "Hang up on him." And he'd hang up, and then Boom. I call the next, get a new clerk, do the same routine again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And eventually he'd get on the phone with me and we'd work something out and he'd put me back in. But then I hit him with that round robin parlay of death back in that 1 year, and then that was, I think, about the end of it. He never took me back after that. But I'll tell you something that I did to him was when the Atlanta Falcons lost to the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl. The spread was around 7 on that game. And close to post, Spiro moved the game to 8.5 to draw some money on the Falcons. And I bet the Falcons, and I bought 2 points to plus 10.5 minus 50 for 100,000. And the Falcons lost the game by 15, so I lost that bet. So it was like a year later or something like that, and I called up and I'm trying to make a bet and I wanted to buy 2 points. And they said, you're not allowed to buy 2 points. The most you're allowed to buy is a half a point or 1 point. I said, really? I said, that's very interesting. I said, okay. I get off the phone. I call our customer service department and I put in a claim for the Super Bowl bet, saying they should have never taken that bet because they made a mistake. They sold too many points. And so I kept calling up to complain about that. And then I would tell them, I said, I've already spoken to Spiro about it. And he said, Spiro said that you're going to be sending me a check for a refund. And I just wish I was a fly on the wall when whichever person it was walked up to Spiro and said, we need you to authorize this check. And then I got a call from him to, Fats, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm filing a claim. I said, you won't sell 2 points now, so you must have made a mistake back then. So I'm filing a claim on the bet. But just stuff like that. I used to break his balls every chance I could get. A lot of it was in fun. Spiro, as much as he didn't, he threw me out a lot, he actually did like my sense of humor, because there were many times where we'd get on the phone and just chat for a while and stuff like that. And so we kind of got along. He appreciated my sense of humor, except when it was attacking him.
So, it seems like you guys, when I say you guys, I'm talking about like top sports bettors, you know personally the guys at these books offshore, like, Spiro or Stan and at Pinnacle or whatever. Like, do you, because that is your business, would you get on a plane and fly down there and meet these guys? Or how is it that you end up knowing them?
Well, Spiro, I just knew him from talking to him. And the only time I met him was I actually, for an unrelated incident or an unrelated situation, it was when I was developing I was in the process of developing the software that a sportsbook uses to record all its bets with the internet interface. And I had developed that for a book, and I went down there to meet Spiro to give him a demo of the software. But had it not been for that, I never would have met Spiro. Most of the time, a lot of these people you could know for 20, 30 years and never meet them.
I see, just from talking on the phone to them.
Yeah, and you would know them from talking on the phone, and you could have, a lot of, personal conversations too, but you'd never meet them. Like Monty, who used to run the Chris office back in the day, I did get to meet him once when I went down to Costa Rica, but sometimes late at night I would, he'd stay in the office and work the halftime of the Hawaii game on a college football Saturday. And I'd call up the bettor and I'd get him on the phone, and next thing you know, we'd start chatting or whatever. So, you know, you build up these relationships, and from time to time, something comes, you know, a situation will come around where you'll meet. Now, with the advent of Bet Bash, created by Spanky, which just took place in April down at Circa, there is a case where a lot of people got a chance to put the name to the face that had never, or face to the name that they had never done before. So, you know, with the advent of Bet Bash, and if that's becomes a yearly event, the likelihood of dealing with people and not being able to know what they look like will diminish.
So Billy Walters, way back, had a trial about using computers to help make bets. Why is that important to players today, and what do you know about that trial?
The 1992 Billy Walters computer trial was something that was real big, because what had happened was, as you know, the way Billy bets was he would decide to go out on a game, and he'd call two guys, and they called two guys, and then they'd call two guys, and it was a network. It was like that shampoo commercial from way back. But so anyway, he called so many people that the government thought they'd uncovered some big bookmaking operation. And so they had done wiretaps, and the government says stupid. The FBI agent in charge of the entire operation was this guy named Thomas Noble, who couldn't tell the difference between a bookmaker and a bettor to save his life. And so he thought he'd uncovered this big bookmaking operation. And then eventually one day they served warrants like all across the United States at one time and scooped up everybody involved. What made the case so important was that after the government got a look at all their information, they found out that these guys weren't bookmakers, but they were actually bettors. But they'd spent so much time and money, they said, well, we got to charge them with something. So they decided to charge them with basically what they called organized betting, and tried to claim that that was illegal. And the law clearly wasn't on their side, but they did it anyway. And for guys like me, who, I mean, I just come to Vegas in 1989, so I'd only been out there 3 years. If Billy were to lose this trial, then everything that I was doing was going to be deemed illegal, and me and everybody else that I knew in the business was basically going to be out of business. So the guy I worked for, the businessman, recognizing the importance of the trial, said, Fats, I want you down there at that trial every single day. Take notes, report to me every day. Let me know what's going on. Keep track of that trial. So I went down to the courthouse. I sat in the front row. I was sitting directly behind Billy Walters and his wife. And there was a whole defense table. There was like 13 defendants at the table. Now, most of them had public defenders, and then there were like 2 or 3 main lawyers that worked for, that dealt with Billy and Dr. Menlin. And so anyway, what ended up happening was they went through this whole trial, and they were obviously acquitted. But some interesting things occurred in the trial that were just laughable. And there was one thing that, separate and distinct from this FBI investigation, the IRS was doing a sting operation on Billy Walters and the gambling, on Billy Walters. What they had done was they had set up a fake bookmaking office, and this office was taking bets, and of course, naturally, Billy Walters was was betting there. And, well, anyway, when they did all the raids, the FBI raided the IRS undercover operation and scooped up all the IRS people. So when it came to that part of the trial, the government or the defense requested, they wanted all the discovery and all access to everything that was seized in the raid of the IRS office. And the government couldn't produce it. And the judge said, well, what do you mean you can't produce it? And the prosecutor for the government stood up before the judge and said that it was destroyed in the normal course of business. And the judge was just not happy about that. And then another real key part of the trial, and which was really humorous as well, was one of the defendants was a guy named Proctor Hawkins. And Proctor Hawkins was a bookmaker by trade. And that's all he did. He was just a bookmaker. And he was like, your standard old-time bookmaker. He booked his bets, he wrote his bet, whatever he did. And he had nothing to do with betting. He strictly booked. And he was one of the bookmakers that Billy would call and bet with. But he got scooped up in this whole trial. So after the defense rested his case, a lawyer by the name of Laura Fitzsimmons, who's a public defender, who's, I think, gone on to have a pretty good legal career in Las Vegas. I think I saw one time a clip where she got as far as to argue something in front of the Supreme Court. And but anyway, she stands up before the judge after the defense rests its case, or the prosecution rests its case, and she makes a motion that all the charges against her client be dismissed because all the evidence presented in this case has clearly shown that her client was a bookmaker and not a bettor, and he's only been charged with betting, and therefore he should not be a part of this case. There's nothing to do with him. And the government, I gave some kind of lame response, and the judge ruled on it and said dismissed. And then, of course, the jury comes in now, and they're down to 12 defendants instead of 13 defendants. They don't know what happened to the other guy. So that was
that's hilarious.
The basis of the trial. Something else I have from that trial that's very interesting is when they did the during the trial, when they played wiretaps, they would play the wiretaps, and then they would be transcribed. So they would pass out copies to like the jury and everybody of the wiretap that they were listening to. So after the trial was over, I went up to the prosecutor and I said, well, what are you going to do with those? Or I asked if I could get a copy of the wiretaps from the trial. And she said, yeah, we don't need them anymore. Come by my office. I went by her office and I picked up 2 boxes of like the size of a box you would get a ream of paper in. So 2 full boxes of that size of wiretaps of Billy Walters and all the people in the case. And I still have those to this day. Never got around to, and I'm sure they would make for an interesting book or something like that at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
I've never gotten around to going through them, but I have them.
Yeah, studying those wiretaps would have told you a lot about Billy's business model.
Well, a lot of them were, you just hear Billy call up and say, this is 382 red, run them down, and then you hear the guy on the other end going Pittsburgh 3, San Diego 2, et cetera, just going right down the list. So some, and then maybe at the end or in the middle he'd say, give me Chicago +4 for 3 dimes or something like that. So a lot of it was just that, which are interesting to listen to, but a lot of them are similar. But one of the things that came from that was, from me being there, was I actually got to meet Billy, and that was how I ended up developing a relationship with him after the trial. And another funny thing from that trial, and this is really interesting, was right outside the courtroom in the hallway, there was a payphone. And on every time the court was in recess, the defendants would race out of the courtroom and they'd be lining up at the phone because it was the only time during the day they had to get any bets in. And they were doing all their betting from the phone on the payphone right outside the courtroom they were on trial in. So I always found that kind of amusing as well.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, we're going to talk about when you and Spanky were arrested. And before we do that, though, we need to take a brief break for commercials. The South Point has more than 10,000 games returning at least 99%. This is more such games than anyone else has. From 3 a.m. to 3 a.m., Monday through Thursday in June, the $600,000 spin to win promotion. You play 2,500 video poker points or 750 points at slots or a combination of those, and you spin the virtual wheel at your machine. You may win between 2,500 and 100,000 slot points, worth $750 to $300 respectively, or free play amounts between $5 and $100. You may spin up to 4 times per promotion day. They have run similar promotions before, but never this exact one. In the past, it was 2,000 points you needed to play, and now it's 2,500. The amount they are giving away has gone up. So what this ends up is it's probably worth more. Now, as I record this, I have had 16 data points, and the average is slightly less than $12 for those 16. So I expect that the mean will be higher than that. I have not yet hit anything higher than $25, and likely once or twice during the month I will. So the average will be higher than $12. It just, at the moment, it isn't there.
If you're serious about counting cards, the Blackjack Apprenticeship membership is a great way to learn, train, network, and get the resources you need to succeed. We've had quite a few guests on Gambling with an Edge who exclusively trained and got their start through Blackjack Apprenticeship. Check out their website at blackjackapprenticeship.com. They have member forums, training software, and guides to help you learn. So that's blackjackapprenticeship.com, and there will be a link in the show notes.
Videopoker.com is the best place to play lots of games. If you sign up for the gold membership, $8.95 a month or $79.95 a year, this allows you to get correction on many of the games. The game of the week is Peek and Play Poker. This is a 7 coins per line game where you get to see the first card off of the pack of 47. You must take this card if you draw. Requires you, as an example, let's say you're dealt ace, king, queen, jack of spades, and a red 4. In normal video poker, you hold all 4 spades, say a prayer, and hope for royal. Also assume that the peek card is another ace. Goodbye royal flush. It ain't going to happen. So here you just hold the single ace because you know a second ace is coming, and the new ace may give you 3 or 4 aces. So you'll have to work out the strategy for yourself, but it is an interesting game. All right, we're back talking with Fats. At one point, both you and Spanky were arrested. Tell us about that.
Well, I had gotten an introduction to Spanky. I had heard of him, I knew of him, and somebody said that it would be a good, we probably could do something together. So they hooked us up, we talked, and we decided, we'd try to work together and see what we could do. And at the time, and this is, his business model and mine were a little different. He was more, middling a lot and trying to earn a lot of lower risk. And now today he's much a bigger player in a risk player in the market. And I was always just I'll bet and try to win kind of guy. So we didn't really he was worth following in that regardless of which side, even if he was going to play both sides of the game, regardless of which side, usually whichever side he was looking for help on, it was going to close with closing line values. So it was good to know, but it wasn't always. It was helpful, and I would help him out, but it wasn't anything I wanted to follow religiously, because it was, even though it was still going to probably win, I like to have a little more solid information base. But anyway, so we just got to a point where if he needed me to help him with something, I would help him. If I needed help, he would help me. And we just kind of got along as just colleagues that knew each other. I wasn't doing anything for him in any official capacity. But probably about a month after we started talking was when the investigation into him started. And so I got dragged into the wiretaps for talking to him. And so eventually my phone became wiretapped. And when the case finally came down, and they did their sweep and made their arrests, I was indicted along with Spanky, and I was indicted as a bookmaker, which was ludicrous because that's all I've ever done was bet, and I'm very, very careful to, if anybody even says, "Oh, you're a bookmaker," I'm like, no, and I go through the trouble of trying to explain it to them that I'm not. So that was how the arrest started, and we first got involved. Do you want to be more specific as to where you want me to go from there on this?
Well, what I'd like to start with, sometimes these things are really bad. Like they show up at your door at 4 a.m. with machine guns and stuff. Was it that kind of arrest, or was it civil and cordial and?
Well, yes and no, in the sense that they did show up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they bang on the door, and it was boom, 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 boom. And my wife looked out the window and she said, "There's cop cars all over the place." So the first thing we were concerned about was that our stepson who was living with us had a bull mastiff who was a sweetheart. He had a bark that was fierce. So we were worried they're going to come in and shoot him. And so my wife went downstairs and said, "Look, let me lock the dog up so that there's not, they let her do that." In the meantime, that gave me a few minutes to hide whatever money I could hide and hope they don't find it. And I had a lot of money in the house, but a lot of it was in tickets that we'd already bet for the week because they were coming in. It was a Wednesday, I think. And we'd already bet Monday Tuesday, Wednesday, or early in the week. So there was a lot of tickets. Plus, it was tickets from the week before that hadn't been cashed yet. So we're talking a lot of money. And I was working with about 4 or 5 different groups. So I had money from a lot of different people that I was responsible for. And I had this shoebox in my bedroom under the TV that pretty much had all the tickets and money in it. And the cash was, there was maybe like 25,000 in cash, a few chips, and some future tickets, and then a bunch of tickets that weren't cashed, and tickets for that weekend's game. So I looked in the box. I said, okay, I'll leave a couple chips, 5,000 in cash, and these futures to win the Super Bowl, which are probably not going to win anyway. And I leave them, and I take the rest of the stuff. I said, where am I going to hide this? Because they're going to rip everything apart. And at the time, I was making weekly visits to a wound clinic because I had a wound that needed to be treated. And then we had ourselves during the week, we were responsible for changing the bandages on a regular basis. So in the corner of the bedroom, right next to the night table, was a weight hamper, which, was like a mesh, like you could see through it. It was like a plastic hamper. So like if you filled it up with water, it wouldn't hold any water because it would all just come out the sides. And then we had a red trash bag in there, which was for like medical waste and stuff like that. And I'm looking at that, and I was like, I could just stick it in there. Nobody's going to go in that bag. And then I'm thinking, but then my wife might throw it out. So I couldn't put it there. So then I just lifted the bag up, took it out, put the stuff underneath the bag, and put the bag back in. And I said, well, we'll see what happens. Well, anyway, after they were all done, now luckily I had forgotten that there was about my other stepson, who was a runner for me at the time, was holding about 50,000 cash in his bedroom, which he had in his dresser drawer or something. So they asked me if there was any money, and I told them check the shoebox, and I said that's it. And they said, well, if we don't, we have to we'll rip the house apart if we have to. And then they found the money in my stepson's dresser, so they figured, all right, well, we got it all. And they never found and they ripped our bedroom apart, like the closet and stuff like that. And they didn't find anything else, looked under the bed and all that. And but they never found that money, which was a lot. And so what happened was, after I got to jail and I had my wife I made a phone call to my wife, and I had her read me the receipt of what they took. And I saw the 50,000 and the few tickets and stuff like that. And I said, that's it. And she said, yep. I said, okay, good. And that was it. But I know they're listening, so I can't really say. And my wife knew from looking at it that there was still more. So the funnier thing is, after the FBI, or not the FBI, whoever it was that raided us, ripped apart our entire house searching, my wife and my stepsons re-destroyed the house looking for where I hid the money. And they couldn't find it. And when I finally got out, and they were like, where's and I told them, and they were like, they couldn't believe it. It was amazing that we got away with that. And then I was able to get everything cashed out in the next week or two, and get just about everybody paid back. Except, they did confiscate money from, they confiscated money from my Palms account, which was, what was that? That was the Canner Gaming at the time. And that wasn't fair, because I had an arrangement with somebody in town Because when you would get to the weekend, there was never enough money to bet football, no matter what you did. And so I had an arrangement where on Friday afternoon, if I needed money, I could just see him. I could borrow like 150, 200,000, use it to bet with over the weekend, and then pay him back on Monday. And I used to do this every week. And what happened was I needed money to put money in my Cantor account. And there was a guy that I was doing stuff with who had money with my friend that I used to get the money advanced from. And I called him and I said, I need to borrow, or I need to pick up this money. And so I picked up this 150 and I put it in my Palms account, and it was put in my Palms account. And then I bet with it and blah, 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 blah. I lost a little, then ran it back up. Well, anyway, when I got my wiretaps, and I asked for a copy of every wiretap phone call, I just found on the wiretaps evidence, because they played for me the wiretap of where the meet was set up to go pick up the 150 to deposit in the account. But they left out the wiretap from 4 calls earlier when clearly the conversation was I was borrowing this money. And the person I was borrowing the money from was somebody who was authorized enough by them to post 150,000 bail for one of the other defendants in the case. So they clearly acknowledged the fact that this guy's money was good, and I clearly was borrowing it from them, but you still couldn't, they held you over a barrel. And eventually I just had to give up the money to end the case.
Really? Oh my God. And were the charges bookmaking? Was it the same thing that Billy Walters went through?
It was money laundering and enterprise corruption were the charges, and then I just was referred to as a bookmaker. But I told them, I said, look, I'm not guilty, and I'm not going to take a plea and say I did something I didn't do, because Judge Judy says don't do that. If you didn't do it, if you plead guilty, then you did it, whether you did it or not. So I couldn't take a plea, and so I kept holding out. And I'll tell you something else that I did on that case was show how corrupt the Queens County District Attorney's Office was. I had my lawyer set up because they were wanted to know if I would maybe consider being a cooperating witness. So they set up a conference, an off-the-record meeting with the attorneys, and the district attorney and the head district attorney were there, and the detective was there, and my lawyer, and me. And I said, look, I haven't done anything wrong. I'll tell you anything you want to know. I said, and if you want me to testify about Spanky, I said, I'll be more than happy to take the stand and tell you everything I know about Spanky and what he does. Because Spanky wasn't doing anything wrong. All Spanky was doing was betting. So there's nothing that Spanky was doing. I said, I'll tell you whatever. I don't want a deal. I don't want to deal. I'll just be happy to take the stand and tell you the truth. And they said they can't, the district attorney said, well, we can't do that until we're sure you understand what the truth really is.
We have to tell you what the truth is.
That's how corrupt they are. So anyway, I refused. I held out, and the judge was getting real annoyed because there was out of 25 defendants, it was they were down to 3, me, Spanky, and one other guy. And I wasn't budging. I wasn't taking a deal. And then finally my lawyer gets them to make a deal where I would plead guilty to a 6th degree misdemeanor unspecified. And what that meant is that at some point during the course of their investigation, I committed some crime unspecified. And that's what I pled guilty to. And to my recollection, during the course of their investigation, I did go over the speed limit once. And so that was the crime I basically was pleading guilty to.
But they stole the money. I mean, they legally stole the money.
They did steal the money. They would not let me fight for the money separate. Like the money had to be included in the case. And then the other stipulation I had was that I wasn't making a deal unless they gave me a letter retracting their statement referring to me as a bookmaker in their press release when they did the case. Now, I believe in the Spanky Be Better, Better interview, I read that letter. And the letter basically said, the Queens County District I was charged with whatever. The charges have been dismissed against me. At no course during their investigation did any evidence they come up with any evidence that I was, or ever was a bookmaker, and that I operate as a legitimate professional gambler, and they see no reason why I shouldn't be able to continue doing what I was doing before.
Wow.
But they still stole my money.
Yeah.
So that's the corruption of that case.
If some of our listeners were considering starting out as a sports bettor, do you have any advice for them?
Well, first piece of advice would be don't quit your day job. The second piece of advice would be if you're just starting out, it's all about information. So you have to pick a sport that maybe because if you're not, especially if you're somebody who wants to break in, but you're not going to be betting large, pick a sport that is not in the mainstream, that doesn't have high limits, because what's not high limits for most people and that they don't pay attention to would be high limits for you. So, for example, maybe following tennis or NASCAR or golf or, player props, stuff like that. I mean, especially if you're into fantasy sports, a lot of times, if you're real strong at doing fantasy sports, some of the props that are out there might just jump off the page to you. But also what you want to do is you want to have information. And so you want to, whatever it is that you're going to try to specialize in, you want to do as much reading as you can. Because a lot of times on stuff like that, you can go on the internet and pick up a piece of information that is probably not in the line, because I mean, these bookmakers now, with all the different offerings they have, they don't have time. They just have a general formula and they plug it in. And, if an injury or something comes up, they get to it. But for the most part, they're not. You can find information that's not in their line, and then take advantage of that to bet with. And the other thing is, I would say, always know why you're betting something, because at least if you know why you're betting it, that's somewhat of an edge.
What do you mean, why you're betting it?
Well, the reason, the example I give is a guy, his name used to be Buddy, who was he was kind of the mentor of the businessman. And a lot of times, like, if you would call one of these big offshore books, and let's say they were taking $10,000 a game, and you call up and you say, all right, give me so-and-so for 10 dimes. And then the guy at the front desk says, ask him if he wants more. That's usually a bad sign. So when the clerk would come back to me and say, do you want any more? My answer would always be, I don't even want the 10 I just asked you. So in a lot of cases, if you're getting opposition, then you want to, probably, fade away from that side. But in a case where you have a piece of information that other people may not have, and the line's moving against you, what Buddy had said to me was, at least you know why you're betting it. And if you know your information is correct, and that's why you're betting it, it might be something that's just not out, it's not known by the other people. And if they knew, they would probably be betting the same side too. So at least know why you're betting something.
And a reason to make the Monday Night Football game more interesting is not a real good reason.
No, so I'll tell you, a lot of people back in the day, a lot of bookmakers most bookmakers ended up like offshore, they would end their week on Sundays. But then there was a group of bookmakers that they included the Monday Night Football game in their week. So the new week didn't start till Tuesday. So what would happen is you'd see where you were on Sunday, and like usually you would have a settle limit, like 3,000 or 5,000. So if you were under that, you were fine. If you're under 5,000 but close to it, you didn't bet the Monday Night Football game. But if your figure was like 5,300, well, you were betting at least $300 and change to try to get yourself back under the settle figure on Monday night. So a lot of times on the Monday night, players use the Monday night game just to chase, so they didn't have to pay that week.
Or double up to catch up.
Or be stuck. And some people would do it. They would play both ways. So they're either going to get one figure under and not have a settle with the other guy, or they're going to lose, but they're still going to be able to collect from going over with a different guy. So, there's all different ways to do it. But generally, that's a losing proposition.
Are sports betting tournaments part of what you do? And if so, what kind do you like the best?
Well, as far as sports betting tournaments, I've never actually entered a sports betting tournament where you had a specific bankroll or anything like that. However, I've entered a multitude of football contests over the years. Used to always enter the Hilton contest. I played in the DraftKings contest this year. I think I did the Circa contest 1 year before I moved from Vegas. And I did a contest way back in the day at the Riviera. My second, was either in 1989 or 1990, my first or second year in town. And it was, the Riviera had a contest called, it was a winner take all contest. And you'd pick one game each week against the spread, and it was double elimination, and it was $100.
So last man standing, so to speak.
Yeah, last man standing. And so if you lost, you're okay. If you took a second loss, you were out of the thing. So I entered 5 times, and 4 of the entries I played for myself. And the 5th entry, I played for the sports writers in the sports book there. And I said to them, look, I've got 50%, and all of you guys as a group have 50%. And each week, you guys get together, tell me who you want to pick, and I'll submit the pick. And so anyway, after about like 5 or 6 weeks, I was there. All mine were gone. They were still alive. They hadn't even lost one yet. They finally take their first loss. And then they go on, they win again, week 8, week 9, week 10, week 11, week 12. And now it's getting down to, we're like down to like the last 20 people, last 10 people. Finally, we get down to 3 people. And there was 888 people in the contest. So first place was $88,800. And there was 3 of us left. And they picked, Dallas was playing Phoenix on that Sunday. And whatever it was, the spread, they won, whichever team we had won like 41-7 or something like that. It was a blowout. So we were in, and the other 2 people in the contest both had the 49ers over the Rams on Monday night. And the 49ers were like a 12, 13-point favorite, something like that. Well, the Rams jump out 14-0, and I'm like, this is great. And then San Fran, that was back in the day with, it was Montana, and he just blew right past them, and they came back and they won and they covered, beat them easy. So then we go to the next week, and the next week we had a game, we won our game, and they both had the same pick again, and they both won. Now we get to the last week of the regular season, and we had the Miami Dolphins minus 6.5 against the Indianapolis Colts. And the other 2 guys both had the San Francisco 49ers minus 2.5 against the Vikings, something like that. And
But they could pick the same team again and again in different weeks.
They obviously must have known each other, or it was the same person had 2 entries or something like that, and they just decided they were going to team up. So anyway, both games are being played at the same time, and Miami's up by 9. There's like 2 minutes to go in each game. Miami's up by 9, and Minnesota's up by 4, and Montana's taken out of the game. And so I'm really looking good. And with like less than a minute left, Dan Igwabuki takes a 56-yard field goal to make the game fall 6, and we lose by a half a point. But that's okay, because I'm still, if Minnesota covers, I'm good. So anyway, the backup quarterback for San Francisco is in, and it's like a.
Is that Steve Young?
Yes, I was getting to that. And it was like a 3rd or 4th down play, and I still see highlights of it from time to time. And he scrambles, and he ends up scrambling like 50 yards for a touchdown, and they win the game by a half a point. And that was how we got knocked out.
Bad beat stories happen in all kinds of gambling, not just poker.
Yep, that was one though. That was early on in my career in Vegas, and I really felt bad because the ticket writers were like, that would have been a big score for them.
Yeah.
I mean, me too, because I would have gotten half, but they would have, the whole ticket writing staff would have chopped 44,400. So.
All right, as last time. Fact, it's fun talking to you. We have enough questions. You're going to have to do this again someday. We want to mention @real_fats. And at the end of the show, we have a recommended section. So, Richard, do you have a recommended for our audience today?
I do. Recently on Tim Ferris' podcast, he had Ed Thorpe as the guest. And it is a fantastic interview, one of the best interviews with Ed that I have heard. So it's over 2 hours long. It's just really excellent. And Ed's about to turn 90, but he is incredibly sharp and healthy, and I learned a lot of stuff about him I didn't know. So I highly recommend it. I think certainly anybody in gambling and people who get into the markets and stuff, and he's got a lot of. Anyway, it's just great. So check that out, Ed Thorpe on Tim Ferris' podcast.
Is it his gambling stuff or his Princeton Newport stuff, or
it's
a lot
both?
Of everything?
It's both, and things like I didn't know. Like I knew he was kind of a health nut, but he was a bodybuilder. I mean, not a bodybuilder, but he says in the interview that he was a 98-pound weakling at UCLA, and he said actually a 150-pound weakling, and he went by these guys who were like pumping iron down in the gym, and he was like, boy, that's a big waste of time. And a guy bet him, like, you come here 3 times a week with us, and within a year you will double your strength. And so he said, okay. And so, within a year he was like benching 375. Anyway, and then later, he got into running and I guess ran marathons for several decades. So, but there's lots of gambling stuff in there too. So,
I'm looking forward
really
to
good.
that.
Yeah.
My recommended is a book. I read a lot. And this is The Hanging Judge by Michael Ponsor, Ponsor. Now, I enjoy lots of legal thrillers of various stripes, and to me, Michael Ponsor was a new author. So he is a judge in real life, and he's written 2 books that I know about. And the first one is called The Hanging Judge, and it involves a trial involving a first-degree murder case. Now, I don't put him in the same level as, say, William Bernhardt or Grisham or Turo, but he's good, and I enjoyed it. And all lawyer novels have a whole lot to do with strategy, which is a whole lot what Gambling with an Edge is all about. So, Fats, do you have a recommended for us?
Yes, I do. I just saw this on Netflix the other day, and it was absolutely incredible. On Netflix, if you go into their documentary menu, there's a documentary called Bad Sport, and it's a series of 1-hour documentaries on various scandals in sports history. And the first episode is about the Arizona State point shaving scandal from 1994 in college basketball. And I watched, now a movie was made about that, which was a little Hollywooded up. But this documentary really, from my experience and what I remember at the time, this really nailed it and got the facts straight and really looks like what happened, and a great explanation and story as to how it all transpired and went down. And I recall what I wasn't aware of. I remember the game when the whole scandal kind of broke out, when their game went from 12-3 on a late one college basketball season. And I remember because this was the 1 year, this was shortly after we were moving directly for Billy Walters, and I had gotten a call from Billy would like the other side, and he bet the game, and then the line dropped even more, and then the game went maybe from 12 to 9, and then he laid 9, and then the game went from 9 to like 6.5 or 7. He bet it again, and then the game started went to 5, and I was like, Billy, what's going on here with this game? And Billy, I'm going to try and do it with his voice and everything. Billy said to me, he said, I don't know what's going on exactly, Fats, but there's something wrong with this motherfucking game. He said, there's a bunch of college kids wearing Arizona State paraphernalia running all over town with satchels full of money, betting the crap out of this thing. So something stinks, he says. I don't know what it is. I give up. I'm not betting on it anymore. We like the other side, but something ain't right. And so what ended up happening to uncover the scandal was the FBI. Well, watch it. You'll see what happened.
Oh,
but
sounds good.
That game was the 5th of 5 games that were actually fixed. And that was the one where the shit, quote, hit the fan. But they tell the whole story of how it happened. And I remember that day and that particular game distinctly because it was like nothing I'd ever seen in my first 5 years out there. So I highly recommend that episode.
Good. That does seem interesting.
Yeah, we'll put a link to it in the show notes. Sounds good.
All right, Fats at real_Fats. We're going to hear from you again someday. It's a pleasure as always. Thank you.
I enjoyed it, and be happy to come back whenever you want me.
Thank you, Richard. Go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody. Good day.